Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for March 25th, 2025. Let's start off today by talking about the first vision. The vision that Joseph Smith claimed to have that was the catalyst to him organizing the Mormon Church in the first place. I was taught this story from the very beginning of my life. I won't go into all the issues with the first vision, or should I say visions, but what I want to focus on today is how it was portrayed to me and all members of the church and how it actually would have happened. Here is the video that I was shown pretty much my entire life. Joseph, the quaint farm boy, curious about religion but not feeling settled in any of the current sects, reads the Bible and gets the idea to ask God which church is true. He then decided to venture into the lush green woods behind his family home and say a prayer. This was not only depicted in this film, but every piece of Mormon artwork that I saw about the first vision. Now let's go to an article from KSL that says, some scholars believe March 26, 1820 could have been the day that 14-year-old Joseph Smith had his first vision. The researchers have used weather data and extrapolations to choose March 26th. Joseph Smith would have been working too hard at tapping sugar maple trees to have gone to the woods to pray until the temperature got right, and he'd have free time and the first day would have been the 26th, says BYU church history professor Stephen Harper. Okay, so that means it would have been this same time of year just 205 years ago. And herein lies the problem of what the church has portrayed versus what would have actually been the reality. Just one among many, of course. Here is a picture of what the sacred grove looks like this time of year. Cold and gray, trees devoid of leaves, sticks and branches covering the ground. Spring hasn't really started yet because winter hasn't decided whether it's over or not. Definitely not the same as the faith-promoting art and movies that I grew up with. And now let's go to religionnews.com for Emily Jensen's answer to what does the new LDS messaging really say about women in the church? First, we aren't trusted with our own history. In the recent worldwide Relief Society broadcast, the women of the Relief Society General Presidency spoke in broad and glowing terms about the organization's 1842 founding in the red brick store in Nauvoo, Illinois. But they left out how Joseph Smith famously told the Relief Society sisters, "I turn the key to you." This is not the first time that statement has been removed from the church's official discussions of the founding moments, likely because it might lead some to think Smith was conferring priesthood authority as priesthood keys could imply authority. Similarly, the New Gospel Topics essays tells the story as follows. In 1842, Joseph Smith organized the Relief Society through divine revelation after the pattern of the priesthood. This gave women authority, sacred responsibilities, and official positions within the structure of the church. The Relief Society leaders also invoked the care the early sisters offered in helping male church leaders in Nauvoo. While that's true, another goal of the organization was to discover who among them was participating in polygamy with male leaders. Polygamy caused heartache and rifts in the Relief Society, with some women being excluded from the organization because they were suspected of being plural wives. This conflict would lead to the disbanding of the group under Brigham Young, a hiatus that lasted for 2 decades. All this conflict is obviously too messy for leaders to discuss. And whenever leaders bring up the Relief Society history, I am reminded of how the society lost its independence in the 20th century. While in the early days it was a side organization to the church with its own leaders, fundraising, and finances, the Relief Society is now run by the church and its male leaders. The New Gospel Topics essay discusses this, but it presents the expansion of male authority in glowing terms. The Relief Society once maintained its own programs, raised its own funds, and administered its own budget. As the church grew throughout the world in the 20th century, church leaders received revelation that led in the 1960s and 1970s to greater coordination, standardization, and simplification of the church's programs. This process, known as correlation, included bringing all church organizations within general and local priesthood lines of authority. This narrative totally erases privileges women have lost from not being allowed to oversee their own organization anymore. Even if you argued the Relief Society was within the structure of the church, as the essay does, it is clear the Women's Society needed to be correlated further under male leaders. The first time I heard about priesthood correlation was in 2019 while I was listening to Mormon Stories episodes 149 through 152, where John interviews Damon Smith. It was one of those times where I really felt the phrase mind blown. I had to keep rewinding the episode and making sure I heard what was said because it was so shocking to me. Matter of fact, I think I might go back and listen to those episodes this afternoon, and I would highly recommend you do the same if you have interest in this topic. They really helped me to understand how corporate the church is and how very little it has to do with God. I am also currently halfway through Taylor Petry's book, Tabernacles of Clay. I have it right here. And he talks about priesthood correlation and how it stripped the Relief Society of its autonomy. On page 37, he says, the Correlation Committee under Lee's charge carried massive authority to usher in a new era of Mormon teaching and to centralize church finances, administrative power, and decision-making. In the 1960s, Correlation leadership slowly weakened the Relief Society, stripping it of its budget, its independent publications, and its active social services agency. A goal of this movement was to diminish women's authority in the church in deference to the male priesthood. According to Lee, the whole effort of Correlation is to strengthen the home and to give aid to the home in its problems. One of his employees wrote even more pointedly, the whole tone of priesthood correlation seems to be the establishment of the divine patriarchal order. The Correlation movement was dedicated to patriarchal leadership in the church and in the home under the guidance of the priesthood. Back to the article by Emily Jensen. Second, we are expected to redefine historical language to fit the current narrative that diminishes women's roles. The Gospel Topics essay fumbles an answer to the question, I've heard that Relief Society presidents were once ordained. Is that true? The essay claims ordination in this sense, meaning the conferring of priesthood office via prayer and laying on of hands by another who holds a higher priesthood office, meant something different in cases regarding women. It also adds that former President John Taylor later clarified Joseph Smith didn't mean priesthood ordination. I laughed at the section in the essay that says women used to prepare the sacrament table and gave blessings to heal the sick in the name of Jesus Christ, but without invoking priesthood authority. It recounts this history, but includes entire paragraphs quoting President Dallin Oaks about how all power in the church is priesthood power. It's progress that the essay concedes that women used to have much more of a role in administering the church than women do now. However, it simultaneously insists women don't have the priesthood and that all of those holy acts are done under the auspices of priesthood power. Additionally, in Renlund's Relief Society broadcast address, he said, you can call on the powers of heaven to receive personal revelation and understand the doctrine of Christ. This reference to calling on the powers of heaven is used to describe those with priesthood authority, but leaders argue it's not priesthood authority when a woman does it. It's just priesthood power. From this, we can infer the church is splitting hairs over definitions to keep women in their place. And this right here is why the church can be so harmful, because they hide in plain sight. They use language to lead their members to a place that does not exist. Men, hordes of men, the first presidency, the Quorum of the 12, and 12 quorums of 70, stand up to tell women they have priesthood power, hoping women will then fall in line behind those with priesthood authority. There is not one single woman in the church who is not expected to let the men have the final say. Not one. Back to the article. That leads to the third and final point, which is that women remain second-class citizens in the church. All the church's recent statements offer effusive praise about women, paired with emphatic claims that we need you, Renlund said in the Relief Society broadcast, that Jesus Christ needs your influence in his church. Your efforts to serve God's children through Relief Society are vital. Similarly, Relief Society General President Camille Johnson wrote in the introduction to the new essay, we hope all women understand that their families, the church, and the world need their inspired wisdom and influence. But the broadcast as a whole gives off another message. The women leaders of the Relief Society were the second stringers in their own broadcast. As Renlund gave the headline talk, he is even listed first in the church's newsroom article about the event, documented as the speaker joined by 3 women. I mentioned this previously when the invitations about the meeting first came out. It came off as men inviting women to their own meeting. Meanwhile, the Gospel Topics essay asks, how can church members help ensure that women's voices and perspectives are valued and respected? Even the question itself is directed to men as the members of the church, perpetuating women as second class within the church. And it's notwithstanding all the deliberate instructions to include women in a patriarchal hierarchy, such as noting the importance of listening to women and making sure they are in your meetings. Unfortunately, until this behavior is modeled in the highest echelons of the church, it's clear why men aren't including women at the local level. The leaders know this is a problem. At the Arcadia meeting, Renlund said, "The reason for the asymmetry between men and women regarding priesthood office ordination has not been revealed. Part of me wants to shout, you are the revelators. You are the ones to ask these questions." Once again, this article was written by Emily W. Jensen, and I want to applaud her. So well written, and mirrors my own thoughts in many ways. Now let's go to the Daily Mail, where Kelly Lamoureux tells her story about leaving the Mormon church and thriving. She says, "If you told me when I was 19 that I would end up making tens of thousands of dollars from OF, I would never have believed you. I'd always been the good girl, fitting inside the box that society thought I should as a woman. I never wanted to upset anyone and became a Mormon shortly before my 20th birthday. During my upbringing in a conservative household in Gardnerville, Nevada, sex was never talked about. It was considered bad. I was raised to believe that marriage came first, and most of my friends lost their virginity well before I did at the age of 18. I never even had a boyfriend before graduating high school in 1996. Then, after moving to Las Vegas to attend a dental school, I met someone there. Like a lot of people in the area, he was Mormon, and as our relationship became serious, it didn't take me long to convert. I think it filled a void in my life because I was looking for some greater meaning. I followed the rules, never drinking alcohol or even coffee because of the buzz from the caffeine. At 24, I met Jerem, my future husband, after breaking up with my first boyfriend. He was also studying dentistry at the age of 24. We both had a lot going on in terms of academic work, but we just about found the time to fall in love. Jerem, who was raised in Gilbert, Arizona, another very heavily Mormon area, had a devout Mormon background too. We married at a temple in Mesa, Arizona in 2004. Jerem would carry copies of the Book of Mormon in the back of his car, giving them out to people at gas stations. He really considered it his mission to spread the word. I admired him for that and tried to become the perfect Mormon wife. I covered myself up in line with the religion and wore what I can only describe as frumpy clothes. Things are said in Mormonism and in religion in general that if a woman doesn't dress modestly, she'll tempt men and make them sin. As a result, you must wear thin white fabric under your clothes to cover up your skin. You must even wear your bra and underwear on top of the garments, which is what I was taught and did. If it was 130 degrees outside, you'd still have to put up with layers. I was told that if I took them off, I wouldn't be protected by God. My husband was the only person allowed to see my body. In 2006, at the age of 28, I qualified as a fully fledged dentist after 8 years of training. It was an intensive program, partly because they wanted to weed out the people who can't stay the course. Jerem and I worked at a couple of dental practices before establishing our first practice in Monument, Colorado in 2008. I'm a very driven person, and the moment I accomplished one thing, I was on to the next, juggling a demanding career while raising my kids. We had our third girl in 2009 and our son in 2012. Looking back, I realized I put on a lot of baby weight, but I wasn't particularly unhappy with my figure because I thought it was bad to be vain. Then, when Jerem and I were both 35, we started to question the Mormon Church. We read things on the internet which, in our opinion, showed the inconsistencies and hypocrisy of the faith. In the end, we left for good. From my teens to my mid-30s, I'd been wearing dowdy clothes. Suddenly, I was intoxicated by the freedom I felt. I could show off my body after more than 15 years of hiding it. Jerem, who was going through a transformation of his own after leaving the church, loved the change. "I feel like a billionaire because I'm walking beside you," he told me. I started modeling swimwear and sportswear, appearing in online magazines. Next, I launched an Instagram account, striking some sexy poses, and was delighted to get about 150,000 followers very quickly. My photos weren't overtly sexual, but I'd show my cleavage and legs. I also included photos of me as a dentist. I never thought there was a problem in combining the two. In 2023, I got more daring on Instagram, which attracted 800,000 followers. Then a subscriber I have on a different platform I was using offered me $5,000 for a 30-second video of me. The same guy paid me a total of $40,000 over the next 4 weeks for follow-up photos and videos. In late 2023, some people wanted me to go on OF, where the real money was. The content is also monetized by subscriptions, tips, and pay-per-view, so it made financial sense. I made at least $100,000 per month, far more than I was earning for my dental practice. But I didn't want to quit dentistry. It was my passion. Besides, I'd trained so hard to achieve what I had, I wasn't going to give it up. Jerem was my greatest cheerleader, especially when he learned how much money I was making. He even accompanied me to the shoots to watch and make sure I was okay. way. He never got jealous and encouraged me to push my boundaries, but I refused to do anything I felt uncomfortable with. I never introduced dentistry into my OF content, but I saw no shame in telling my subscribers that I was a dentist. But someone somewhere managed to figure out where I worked. Unfortunately, they took screenshots of my performances and sent them to my family, including my kids. It was a horrible, vindictive thing, and I still don't understand why they did it. Meanwhile, somebody on a Facebook group for dentists with hundreds or even thousands of members posted about my OF work. I took an 8-month break from OF after the bully did their thing, but I didn't want them to win, so we relaunched my account in the fall of 2024 at the age of 47. I post content that is a little tamer than before, but it's doing well. My earnings are no longer quite as much as 6 figures every month, but I'm still making a lot of money. I've paid off my student loans, my practice debt, the liability and the mortgage of my $2.8 million 5-bedroom house. I've invested heavily in real estate and my kids' college funds. The dentistry team who works for me and my husband don't care about the way we're supplementing our income. I don't know how many of my patients recognize me. If they do, they don't mention it. I suppose it would feel awkward if I was doing a dental exam on a known subscriber. I know that some people, like those misogynistic dentists on Facebook who criticized me, are judgmental, but honestly, I don't give a damn. People take so many different paths when they leave the Mormon church, and I love to hear stories of all valid paths where people heal and learn and thrive. Now let's go to the ex-Mormon subreddit for a screenshot of a post that says, "I'd like to apologize here to everyone in the ward who attended the ward pie, P-I, night. I went to Costco to buy a pie, but by the time I got there, they were sold out. So I quickly grabbed the tiramisu cheesecake instead. After the event, when we were cleaning up, I noticed that one of the ingredients in the tiramisu that I bought was cold brew coffee. One of the teens at the get-together mentioned that it might contain coffee. It was half eaten when we were cleaning up, and I threw the rest in the garbage. I hope you will all please forgive me for this error because I'm sincerely sorry about it." Once when I was a teenager, I went to Arby's with a friend and they got a Jamocha milkshake and we shared it, and I was worried for months after that if I had had coffee. And last up today, let's finish with this great quote that got me thinking that says, "Behind every person who never knows when to let go is that little child who was taught to believe that the depth of love is measured by tolerance." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.